I have been looking for a phone charger holder for a while now. I found this one for free and I only planned on sewing up one of them, but I fell in love with it when I sewed it. I thought it was so cute. So I've made a few more of these. So the way it works is you put your phone in here. You can hang it up anywhere. I have hooks that I will be hanging this on. So I can hang it in my sewing room, in my bedroom, wherever I'm going to be. I can hang this up. Now I did make a change with mine by adding a grommet. On the regular pattern, you don't need a grommet. The pattern has instructions for how you'll use this to just have a bigger opening with no hardware. So if you don't like to install grommets, you don't need to. You can still use the instructions to do it without any hardware. I just know that grommets are so much quicker and easier for me, so I wanted to do it this way. This pattern is free. It is called the phone charging holder. It is from I Think So. I'm going to have the link for it in my description. They have so many beautiful patterns, a lot of free patterns, so definitely look around while you're on their website. I'm using all fabrics from Jane R. Edwards, and we're just going to see how quick this comes together. It really takes no time at all. So you will have two pattern pieces to cut out. You will have to tape this one together. You will cut two out of this shape. You will cut two out of this shape. I decided to use a cotton canvas, so I did not add any interfacing, but I did decide to add a layer of foam in between here for the only stabilizer that I'm using. You could use fleece if you don't have foam. I wanted to use foam, one, because I wanted to quilt it, and two, if this happens to fall, it's a little bit more protection for my phone. I did decide to quilt mine, just a very simple diagonal quilt, 2 inches apart, but you don't have to do this. You could just leave it unquilted. I just thought it would look a little bit cuter. So let's go ahead and put these two aside. You can see I'm adding woven labels and tags to mine. Super cute. So I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to go over the pieces that I'm using today. I'm going to have one woven label, one cork label. I'm going to have my 2 slip pocket pieces. This is where the phone is going to fit into. They are uninterfaced and I just have them clipped right sides together. For this main piece, the base, whatever you want to call it, I did decide to quilt mine. So what I did was I had the 2 pieces, a front and a back, and then I just put a piece of foam in between there and then quilted it. I went ahead and did that part off camera just to save a little bit of time. If you choose not to quilt, you're just going to put your front and your back wrong sides together, layer your stabilizer in between, whether it's a foam or a fleece, and then just baste all around the shape. That would give you the same piece just without the quilting. So that is the prep work for this piece. Then we're going to take out our pocket piece, clip them right sides together, and we're just sewing across the top with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Once you have those slip pocket pieces sewn right sides together, go ahead and separate it. I'm going to use my finger to press this seam flat, and then I'm going to fold the pieces wrong sides together. I'm going to finger press this seam, but you could take it over to the iron if you wanted to. I'm just going to roll and press, and then I'm going to take it back to the machine and top stitch just 1/8 of an inch away across that top piece. If you wanted to baste all across the bottom and sides, you could. I don't feel it's necessary because I'm going to attach it in just a minute to this base or main piece. Since this is such a simple project, I love to fancy it up a little bit, so I am adding a cork tag to the front of this pocket. You do not have to, of course, though. I'm going to choose where I want to place it based on this design. So I'm not centering it right in the middle. I'm actually going to place it right on top of these leaves right here, but you can place it wherever you want. I like for my cork tags to go through both layers, but if you don't want to do that, you could easily separate these 2 pieces just to sew it through the exterior. I'm just going to kind of eyeball this here to make sure it looks okay. Slide it over to the machine. I'm leaving my threads long and I'm just going to sew all around the perimeter here. I left my threads long so that I can knot them in the back instead of back stitching, just so it looks a little bit neater on the front. Now that I have this slip pocket ready, I'm going to just place it here at the bottom. It should match up pretty perfectly on the sides and the bottom, and I'm just going to baste this in place with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the sides and the bottom. If you have any overhang, go ahead and trim that up. I'm just going to put my woven label here at the bottom, at the side, and tack it into place. I'm going to install my grommet at the very end, so the next step is just to bind all around this piece. For my binding, I've been enjoying using a knit fabric. This is actually athletic wear, and it's a very kind of strong stretch. So it's a little bit sturdier than your fold over elastic, and I can cut it as wide as I want. So I actually have cut this at 1.5 inches. So I can sew it on right sides together and then flip it over and sew again. It does take a little bit longer of a process, but I feel like I get such good results with it. So this is the right side of my binding. I'm going to place the right side down on the right side of this front piece. I am not going to fold any of the edges since mine is an athletic wear. It kind of is thicker than what you would normally have as a cotton woven. This material won't fray since it's a knit material. If you're using a woven, you would have to fold it over, but mine won't fray, so I don't have to worry about that. And where it has such a great stretch, it's going to go around these curves really easily. If you're using a cotton woven, definitely cut yours on the bias for this project just so you can have really nice curves and not have any puckering. So now this binding is placed right sides together. It's 1.5 inches wide, and so now I'm just going to start sewing a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to back stitch when I start and stop, and when I go around these curves, I'm going to be really careful because I want to keep that accurate seam allowance the whole time. That is the main important thing with your binding, is keeping that proper seam allowance. So here we are to the curve. You can see I just have this loose laying. I'm not pulling or stretching. I want it really loose because whenever I turn it to the other side, it's already going to have a little bit of tension on it. I don't want any more. I'm also going to try not to sew over any puckers. If you do, it's okay, but try your best not to. And you can see how slow I'm going. I'm just taking one stitch at a time and lifting up the foot and rotating. This is not a part where you will go fast. It's not about speed here. Once you get back into that straight area, it's a little bit easier. Once you get to the end, make sure you overlap. So I have a decent amount overlapped here, and then I'm just going to back stitch and end my stitches. Since I'm using the knit, I don't have to worry about it fraying at all, but if you were using the woven, make sure you would fold it so that the raw edge is under so you won't have any fraying. Once you have your binding sewn on, you've checked your seam allowance, it looks good, what you're going to do is you're going to just start on one of the straight edges and start flipping the binding over. Since mine has that great stretch, you can already see it's kind of pulling in the shape perfectly. I'm going to take this raw edge and kind of tuck it in and fold it over. I want it to match the stitches that I just did exactly. If it doesn't match easily, instead of just pulling hard, what I'll do is just play with the fold so that it lays flat and not having a lot of tugging or tension on it, but I can easily clip it and so that it's covering those stitches. That way, whenever I sew this back on with that same seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch, it'll catch perfectly on both sides. I'm just going to take the time to go all around this piece, clipping and folding to make sure everything is laying nicely. It'll be the hardest to clip around the curves, so make sure you do the straight edges first and then come back in for the curves. I have the binding clipped all around. It looks great. I'm going to now sew with that same seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch. I really want to try to get about 1/8 of an inch away. from the folded edge. I went ahead and checked the back to make for sure everything looks good on the back too. I want to make for sure that this edge is laying directly on top of the edge on the front. Once you do that, then just go slow the same way you did when you sewed it on, and you should be able to catch both sides pretty easily. Look how cute this looks. The binding is sewn on front and back. We have the pocket. The only thing left to do for me is to add the grommet. I'm going to pull out that paper piece to mark where that center placement is, and then I'll go off camera to install my grommet. If you have any questions about how to install a grommet, just let me know. I use my rivet press, so it's really easy to do. I'll come back to show you the final view of how this looks and talk about my final thoughts on this pattern. I have finished all 3 of my phone charging holders and I love them all. Yes, I know this is a very simple, quick project, but sometimes it's just fun to create something pretty that you can actually use and just practice your sewing skills. The pattern is from I Think Sew. It's a free pattern. I will leave it linked in my description. Definitely check out their other patterns, though I was pleasantly surprised with all they have to offer. My fabric is from Jane R. Edwards. I'll leave a link for that as well. My tags, the cork tags, are from Heartwood and Hod. The woven labels are all from Sewing Blurbs. If you have any questions about this project and how I completed it, definitely let me know. Otherwise, I hope today in your sewing room you're able to sew just something fun, that is beautiful, that makes you happy, that you can use as something productive. And I hope that you have an amazing day. Thanks so much for watching.